For almost 60 years, the island nation of Cuba has been an enigma just off the coast of Florida, a communist nation which has shared a contentious relationship with the United States. But now a U.S. president has visited the island for the first time in almost 90 years, even as animosity lingers here and abroad. To talk about what this all means for the U.S. and Cuba, we welcome Albert Goldson. He is from a business consulting firm called Indo-Brazilian Associates. Luis Nevaer is an author. He's also the CEO of HispanicEconomics.com. And joining us again is America's Money Answers man to discuss all the economics surrounding this, Jordan Goodman. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Great to be with you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's discuss, first of all, the significance of this visit. It had not happened with a sitting U.S. president since Calvin Coolidge. We all know the record of what happened in the late 1950s and Fidel Castro's ascension to power. So what was the significance of this? Long overdue? Albert?
Oh, absolutely. Basically, it's really more of a political statement because Cuba, the economy was starting to open up well before his visit. Just for an example, telecommunications field, in 2010, there were only 300,000 mobile phones in Cuba. Now there are 3 million.
But service is awful.
Service is still terrible, but you still have 3 million users. For those people to be able to obtain mobile phones, and even, for example, the licenses for self-employment. Back in 2010, you had about 100,000 licenses granted. Only last year, it's up to 500,000. So President Obama's visit into Cuba basically is more of a symbolic political statement affirming that Cuba is starting to open up dramatically.
Jordan, has Cuba seen the light? They've seen nations all around the world,
Well, they've seen the
including
economic
China,
light, yeah.
including China, which for many years was a closed economy.
They've seen the economic light, but not the political light. Okay, in other words, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. They're trying to have all these companies come in and rebuild their ports and their hotels and all that, but not give up any political control whatsoever. And that's what President Obama got.
But
He
as
did not
soon as
get
I
any
heard-
political concessions at all.
But as soon as I heard this, I thought immediately companies like Marriott and other major international corporations are going to pour millions of dollars into that island.
And they're not going to own a thing. It's all owned by the Chinese military, right? When that's
The Cuban military. What happens is,
yes.
the way the political structure is spaced now, any foreign company that goes in can be there only as a minority partnership.
Right.
So, for example, when the Nevaer hotel chain from Spain is in Cuba, they don't own the hotels, they don't own the buildings, they don't own anything except the management contract to manage the hotel, 49%. The Cuban government owns 51%. So any company going in there, that's why it's been so reluctant for Mexican companies, Canadian companies, French companies, anybody else to go in, because they see the deal and it's a very difficult deal.
But why would anybody imagine that as a good deal? You don't own the building, you don't own the land, you own 49% of the business,
Well,
and you can't even call the shots.
Well, the thing
Why is it a good deal?
It's not a good deal. It's a good deal for the Cuban
But why
government.
would U.S. companies be so anxious to invest?
Because they want the terms changed. They want to be able to go in and say, we want 100% ownership or 80% ownership, or we don't want to necessarily be a partner with the Cuban government, but with some Cubans. And that's also very difficult. Right now, the way everything is set up, any company that does business in Cuba has to do it through GAESA. And GAESA is part of the military. They run the hotels, they run the industries, they run tourism, they run the rum, they run tobacco. So you really have to be part of
That's not
an
gonna
association.
change.
It's not, well, so far it's not going to change because Cuba is looking at the future in a very odd way. If the Communist Party remains in power, they're committed to building socialism. That means that it's 51% for the Cuban state. If things change, then everything is up for grab.
But Jordan, Wall Street must be looking at this and seeing opportunity.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they had money, it would be a fantastic market. Nobody's touched it for 60 years.
Right.
They have cars from the 1950s. It's a fantastic market. They need everything we've got. They just don't have any cash and foreign exchange to pay for
But
it.
that's where the United States comes in. That's where China comes in.
So we're going to be the sugar daddy that Russia was before, right?
Is that how you view it?
That's the way the Cubans view it.
Well, what
Well,
happened?
I don't think it's really that all a difficult deal. Look at China. China is a communist country, yet they have a capitalistic economic system. The most recent one is Vietnam. They have a population of about 90 million. It's a communist-run country, yet they have a capitalistic type of economy in which you have small businesses, maybe large businesses, etc., to make money. And Cuba is probably looking at those two examples that have been going on for quite a while and looking at similar type arrangements. And American firms are simply looking to get in the door, just a foot in the door, a little bit of a market share.
Right.
And once Cuba eventually starts to change, open up, perhaps it will no longer be a communist regime, then they will have already established themselves in Cuba.
All right, David Nevaer, how long before the Cuban people see this wealth coming in and have an opportunity and access to the internet and see all these wonderful luxury items come in before they start saying maybe this communist model doesn't work?
Well, they're already saying that, but the government is not responding because the
But
government.
how long before the government has to respond?
Well, it depends. I think 5 to 10 years, that long, simply because what's happening is that the Cuban people are realizing the change is slow. Think about it. December 2014, Obama announces this initiative that the embassies will be reopened in July of last year. Since December until now, thousands of executives from the U.S. have gone down. Only 2 or 3 deals have been made. That's how slow. And people in Cuba are losing patience. When you go there, you see people standing around in lines around the block at the Mexican embassy, at the Spanish
trying to
embassy.
get out.
All these
Right.
embassies trying to get an exit visa.
Right.
Not an exit visa from Cuba, but an entry visa into those
So
countries.
they are not
They're
seeing the
leaving.
potential here? They're seeing more of the same? Is that what you're saying?
Well, they're frustrated because there's no change. As a matter of fact, last year there were 44,000 Cubans.
But it's
who-
only been
who
1
came.
year.
Well, but when you're young, a year is a lifetime. And if they say, okay, we're open, and it's December and it's March and nothing has changed, and then it's July and nothing has changed, and then it's a year later and nothing has changed, you're saying, I can't wait any longer.
The deals that are being done by foreign countries, not U.S. The Chinese are very big in there. The Brazilians, others are.
Well, Marriott
domestic.
also announced a big deal there as well. They're based in
Marriott, the
Chicago.
cruise ships are potentially going to go in. AT&T.
Yes. American Airlines, a lot of
There,
airlines
there are
gonna
some
fly.
things that are just starting, but a lot of the deals are being done by the Chinese.
But even in those things, it's a little bit misleading because when you say, okay, Delta, American, United are all going to start to fly, great, what does that mean? The plane leaves the U.S., arrives in Havana, they refuel, and they come back. They're not making any investments. They're just ferrying passengers back and forth. So again, that's an infrastructure that the most that they'll invest would be a ticket office somewhere in downtown Havana to sell tickets on American Airlines.
So let me understand this correctly. The investment will go there, but not much will change because the Cuban government still has their hands
Correct.
on the till.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. What about the auto industries? They must see a golden opportunity down
They
there.
have
The
no
cars
money
are
to buy
60,
the cars.
70 years old.
You're right.
Well,
Or
okay.
investors in antique cars who
you
might...
go back to this one fundamental point. You're talking about a Caribbean island nation of people of color who have no money.
Right.
That's Haiti. Haiti, Cuba is Spanish for Haiti. They have no money. Why isn't Ford selling thousands and thousands of cars in Haiti? The Haitians don't have any money. You could open up a Ford dealership tomorrow in downtown Havana. Nobody has money. Unless they call up their relative in Miami saying, hey, wire me $30,000 so I can buy a new car.
Well,
They-
Jordan, is
they
the
need
hope that
foreign exchange.
capitalism will change, and we've seen this. We've seen how it's changed China, which was a closed society.
Yes.
And then they changed their economy a bit, and we saw a lot of growth in
It
China.
has that
and so on.
potential. It does.
On a
The
scale of 1 to
Castros-
10, what's the potential of that happening in 10 years?
In 10 years, I think in 10 years, maybe about 7. I think it's going to take a
So
while.
it is going to happen eventually.
But the Castros have to go.
And they will, because they're older now, and somebody else is
Right.
going to be ruling, most likely
Right.
Cuba in
Well,
10
the only
years.
the only leverage that the Cuban government has, they looked at this stuff. They looked at where are we getting our money from? Who's subsidizing us? With the fall of the Soviet Union, they went through a very difficult time. They call it a special period. The one thing that saved them was Hugo Chavez, who was giving them oil, giving them money.
Right.
He died of cancer.
Right.
Then you have all these problems in Venezuela. That money dried up.
So what you're saying, the next leader is really going to be the one that will make the difference.
They
either
need a
way.
new sugar daddy.
Right.
Or, as you call him, a sugar daddy. Albert, how do you see this coming down 10 years from now?
Well, basically what they're doing, one of the critical things in order to make Cuba work in terms of hospitality, tourism, etc., is really to beef up the infrastructure. The infrastructure has been falling apart for years. It's in complete disarray as far as the roads are concerned, the buildings are concerned.
opportunity for
and
construction
opportunities.
companies.
And also for the oil companies. Currently, Cuba actually produces about 50,000, 50,000 barrels of oil a day, and that supplies about a third of their needs. Now,
Right.
we're exporting oil. So there's a tremendous opportunity for the United States to export oil to Cuba in place of, for Venezuela, to actually fuel, an infrastructure growth, as well as because Cuba, in many instances, is using oil to fuel their electricity needs, which is very rare.
All right.
Natural gas is the big.
We have a
big player.
minute left. Has Raul Castro signed his political death warrant by making this deal with the United States? Eventually, money's going to arrive on that island, and people are going to want change eventually.
A long time. It's not going to be very quick.
Well, yes and no. He's scheduled to leave office in 2018 anyway.
Will he, though?
Well, yeah, because they already have elections to elect a new Communist Party
Right.
leader. But the one thing he's wedging he can do before he leaves is this. He says, okay, to the U.S., we'll allow capitalism, which means Starbucks and everybody else, on one condition. We get Guantanamo Bay back. Because that could be the only legacy that they leave. Their idea, their hope of creating socialism has not succeeded.
And we haven't even touched on the possibility of some sort of military coup.
Well, not a
That could
military coup
change the
because they are the
government.
military.
Another Chavez
but-
rising up in Cuba
Right,
to
but
say
you could
this
have,
is-
right, all of this is predicated on a peaceful transition and evolution within Cuba.
I would submit
We're
to
not
you-
talking
I would
about
submit to you
some
it may not
rebellion
be
or
peaceful.
something.
You never know.
right.
It's possible. The people are very unhappy.
Okay, when Fresh Outlook, thank you, gentlemen, by the way, very stimulating conversation. When Fresh Outlook returns, our ever popular lightning round, we will look at the unusual and not so unusual events of this week, including a tango. We'll be right back.